Get a picture of it. Good.
They're still walking in.
Good evening. Please be seated. Welcome to everyone who has come for this special remembrance of Cecily, especially her nephews, Griff and his wife Lori, Chris and his wife Annie, and her sister-in-law Helen Jones, and Larry and Diane Hargrove, who all have come from afar to join in this celebration. We also welcome all those who are out there in TV land, Zoom land, watching. We will begin with the remembrance of the life of Cecily.
Sister Cecily Jones was born in East St. Louis, Illinois, the only daughter of Harry Gilmore Jones of Belleville, Illinois, and Alice Irene McFaul of East St. Louis. Baptized Margaret Blanche, she was throughout her life called Peggy by her family and good friends. She was close to her two brothers and very proud of them in their adult years. Jack, 2 years older, who became an award-winning aviation writer for the Dayton Daily News. And Bob, 3 years younger, whom she sometimes called Robin, who worked for federal agencies, including the EPA. Their childhood coincided with the years of the Great Depression. Peggy, her mother, and brothers left their father working in East St. Louis and moved for economy's sake to their grandmother's small farm near Cuba, Missouri, a rural area southwest of St. Louis. For a half a dozen of Peggy's most formative years, her daily life revolved around the growing and preserving of food, pumping water from a well, and exploring the woods and fields. Throughout her adulthood, Cecily drew on the experiences and events from those years as the springboard for her poetry and essays. Her writing expressed not only her childhood delight in that rural world, but the spiritual grounding she found on her grandmother's farm. In 2011, Cecily wrote an autobiographical essay in which she explored the sustaining sense of home, connection, and abiding presence, which took root in her during her childhood. She wrote, "Sometimes I think my connection with God grew more from silence than from words. When I remember my childhood, I recall nothing being said at home about God or about prayers or anything religious. We were not one of those families that prayed together and stayed together, though we did stay. Perhaps this lack was because my mother was very reluctant about bringing up religion to my non-practicing Presbyterian father, who had nevertheless made those promises about raising the children Catholic. And Catholic indeed we were raised, but essentially by the Notre Dame sisters at school rather than by any spiritual practices at home. My mother believed so much in wanting us to be brought up religiously that she drove us daily on rutted, iced-over, scrabbly roads 8 miles each way, fording a creek en route to get to the Catholic school in our town. There I learned about God from memorizing the catechism. But I think that on our farm I sensed something of a relationship with God. I was at home there, somehow connected with some presence, even though as a child I was unconscious of nature's effect on my soul. Peggy's family returned to East St. Louis in time for her to attend high school and junior college with the School Sisters of Notre Dame. We have her own account of meeting the Sisters of Loretto, written in 2007 in a letter to a young friend. She wrote, "Having been educated by the SSNDs, first grade through junior college, I then finished college at Webster in St. Louis, where I met the SLs. After graduation in 1945, I was offered a teaching fellowship, meaning in exchange for teaching 3 sections of freshman English at Webster, I could work on my MA in English at St. Louis University. During that year, I gradually decided that I really liked being with and working with these sisters. I liked their friendliness. I liked the way I sometimes observed them interacting with and teasing one another. I liked their senses of humor and their humanness. Finally, I figured I'd like to join this group. No earth-shaking call from God, not even a feeling of anything especially holy about it. I just felt that I might find a fulfilling life with these women with whom I felt so much at home." Peggy arrived at Loretto in June of 1946, along with Pat Mannion, a younger student from Webster. Peggy received the habit and the name Sister Mary Cecily on December the 8th, 1946. 2 years later, she made her first profession. Cecily's account of her Loretto life after the novitiate continues in her own words. "After a semester filling in Mobile, I was back at Webster, where I would remain for the next 12 years, teaching English, and for the last 6 of the years being Dean of Students. Besides teaching, I, with several others, went to St. Louis U for late afternoon and Saturday classes, completing my MA in 1953. In the community, I roomed on the 4th floor of the ad building with 2 other sisters, both around my age in the order. Later, I would move over to living in the girls' dorm with its attendant duties. We were extremely busy. In addition to the professional part of our lives, we each had several chores, offices in Loretto lingo, cleaning the chapel or other areas, serving tables several times a week, pitching in on Saturday afternoons with kitchen duties, such as preparing grapefruit for Sunday breakfast, staffing the guest dining room, taking a weekend shift at the switchboard. Each large Loretto house, Webster among them, included several older, infirm sisters in the community. We younger ones helped care for them, carrying their trays, assisting them with getting ready for the day, wheeling their chairs to the choir loft for Mass. It was all just a part of life. I think what bound us together and what bound me to the community was in large part the work. In those early days, the work of education. At the same time, other aspects of community life still remain the dearest memories for me of strong, courageous women, women who cared for those of us who were younger, women who could enjoy one another's company. It is perhaps those memories which have also kept me bound to Loretto. After Webster, I spent 2 years studying theology and scripture at Marquette, a most exciting and opening up period for me, just at the start of Vatican II. At holidays and in the summer, I could come to the Mother House, where Luke had a way of getting those of us who were away studying to share our learnings with her and others. Then for me came several hard years, because I was assigned to formation work, which I did not find a happy fit. But all the while, the changes in religious life were brewing, and in so many ways it was an exhilarating time, a time when we in Loretto were being introduced to new ideas, new theology, new ways of living, new freedoms, new patterns of community, and a new maturity. The years beginning with August 1970, when our national offices moved to Denver, and when I began living in a small community of 6, later 5, were the happiest and most community-aware period of my life. On our newly set up staff, led by Helen Sanders, I had a job writing Loretto publications. Living with Luke, who at the end of her presidency was free to move into almost full-time justice and peace work, was the privileged opening for my own involvement in peace and justice endeavors, which from then on became the central focus of my life. I loved my staff job so much that I used to tell folks that I never felt I was going to work. I was involved in creating community in a new way, trying to integrate in the pages of interchange the mission and the community of Loretto. At the same time, I became involved with the United Farm Workers, with protesting the Vietnam War, and then on to nuclear issues, the nuclear freeze, justice for janitors and other working groups, gay rights, protesting the Gulf War, working for Middle East peace, and on, with an occasional protest of church policy. I also became an activist in Democratic Party politics and worked as a campaign staff member for Denver's legendary Congresswoman Pat Schrader. I experienced a warm community life, a life in which our community and our mission of working for justice and peace were marvelously integrated. We had lots of happy times at our house. We gave lots of parties, had lots of people over, established some cherished traditions for our little community, and went through whatever hard times came with a sense of loyalty and love. Our interactions with the Denver Loretto community and wider circles of friends enriched us all. I felt that my life was whole. As the youngest in her house of elders, Cecily experienced their gradual aging and supported each one's transition to Loretto Mother House. Eventually, in 2003, Cecily herself moved to Loretto, a move which she described to Ann David Neighbor for the newsletter Our Days. Quote, "In the fine October weather during my first few weeks at the Mother House, I often took Mary Luke for wheelchair rides around the grounds. On these strolls, Luke frequently exclaimed over the trees, their splendid scarves of all colors. Of course, but most especially their sheltering heights. For me, the trees have become twofold symbols. Sturdy, deep-rooted, reaching down to the depths of Loretto's soil, they represent the strength of this place, where my 4 sisters have lived since 1824. steady, embracing, apparently reaching out, sharing their beauty in fullness and in starkness. They represent the welcoming spirit so very tangible at the Mother House. While I cannot deny that I miss many aspects of my long stay in Denver, yet I love this rural atmosphere too. Reflecting on our trees, I am grateful for having returned to this special place where Loretto life has been nurtured for so many generations. And I am especially grateful to all those community members and staff workers who have been so welcoming to me these years of my being home. For me, Loretto has been a beloved home. My own commitment in Loretto has been the source of the full and meaningful life I have known. In ways difficult to articulate, I have come to know here something of the light who is God for me.
Thank you, Eleanor. We will now have one of Cecily's poems read by Marie Eagle. Waking one morning to thickest fog, for Mary Catherine in gratitude. Waking one morning to thickest fog that rolled in swirls up from the valley, no little cat feet here, I stepped deliberately into the cloak of it, which sleeved my wide-held arms, mantling all of me in wrap of gray. Before, I had only watched the banks of fog appear, or gingerly driven down these shrouded roads. This day, desiring touch, embrace of it, I let its mystery envelop all of me in one surround of pewter cloud. Fog blurred the trees, veiled every headstone in swath of haze, made the workers' car lights quiver in their piercings of the dawn. I felt no mist, only a strange security enclosing me, enfolding me in peace. Caressed by sweet encirclement of fog, in which I lived and moved and had my being, oh so briefly, I turned to make my way to Lodz, and saw beyond the field a scarlet sun rising, rising to blaze and bless with sudden clarity. Let us listen to the words from I Am the Way, Loretto's Constitutions, and sing Peace is Flowing Like a River, the song those with Cecily were singing when she died.
the basic desire to be united in love with God, with one another, with all people, and with all creation, shapes this community of faith. Cooperation with others engaged in creating a more just and peaceful world is crucial to a fruitful mission.
Peace is flowing like a river, flowing out to you and me, flowing out into the desert, setting all the captives free.
Let us keep firm the hope we profess, because the one who made the promise is faithful. Our lives are founded upon a profound act of faith in the enduring love of God and a need to share this love.
Love is flowing like a river, flowing out of you and me, flowing out into the desert, setting all captives free.
The Spirit of God is not found. It reveals itself in the lives of everyone. Even as we give to others, we acknowledge our need to learn from those to whom we are sent. As a community, we profess unshakable reliance upon God and human reliance upon one another.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. At this time, Martha Alderson will share a reflection on Cecily's life.
Cecily, Peggy mostly to me, had so many sterling qualities I admired and was such support to me and to many that it would take much too much time and space to elaborate. Nevertheless, there are two special qualities I want to remind us of, as if we didn't know. First, Cecily was ever the political activist, always working for justice. She called it piecework, and no one thought she meant quilting, although she admired quilting. It was frustrating for her when she no longer was able to join in marches and visits to officials. She kept up her activism, though, through writing letters on her own impetus and on request, and, as we all know, through her Sunday petitions. Secondly, Cecily was a writer, especially a poet. After Loretto published a book of her poems, mostly for promise, she continued to write and felt that the later poems were better. I think that was because she was even more intense in her feelings for the helpless and the somehow disadvantaged. She cried as she read or watched the news and as she penned her poetic responses. Here is a quote from an email to Mary Ellen McElroy, who had asked Peggy to lead a group using poetry for the Peace Workshop 3 years ago. I write about the crumbling clothing factory in Bangladesh, the plight of mule ladies, human cargo carriers in Morocco, the cratered Syrian cities of Aleppo and Homs, asking who will light the candles in all of them, and asking God if God feels at home in Baghdad and Vares and so on. What I write comes from a need to identify with those suffering farther neighbors. Certainly, I need to admit that I do not find the search for inner peace a prominent goal of mine. While its possession is always a work in progress, nevertheless, at the age of 90, I find myself much more geared toward the compassion of reaching across the world to embrace those who are undergoing such pain. I also admit that my decades of activism, which I never felt was separate from a spirituality that for me was always centered on the gospel, have shaped my life. So you see, I still pin a no war button on my shirt each day. It is trite but accurate to say that Cecily wrote from the heart, and her heart was enormous. Also her mind. She learned the names of all the visitors to the Mother House, especially the Loretto volunteers, and she wrote personal notes to her pen pals at St. Mary's. Her memory for details, dates, events, from childhood to age 93 was extraordinary. My own favorite of Peggy's poems is one she never chose to read aloud in her many poetry readings, but could count on me to ask for. And sometimes when I wasn't in attendance, someone else would ask for me. It is called For Silver. One reason she didn't choose it was that she didn't want to seem special for having spent a night or so in jail for a peace demonstration, thinking others might think she was bragging. But it is a poignant poem, bringing out the personality of a born leader. After the line describing Silver as part Amazon, part Sprite, she conveys a punch with the next clause. You transcended tedium of what has been your almost only world. And she ends the poem with a description of a later visit back at the jail to see Silver. I heard my phoning voice rise nearly to a shout, as if some urgent volume could arouse your dream of rehab and parole, as if a louder tone might break the 2-inch pane, and a wild belief of yours and mine would hand clasp us together in the shattered showcase booth, where we'd begin a dance for all the vulnerable and those who dare to hope. Cecily told me one time that someone asked her why she didn't write religious poetry. She was stunned that anyone would not see that her every line and every act was as religious as any of us would ever be.
Let us pray. God of all mercy, you showed Cecily the path of long life, the fullness of joy in your presence, and happiness in your embrace, Lord. Give us the wisdom and the strength to practice unshakable reliance upon you and human reliance on one another. Welcome Cecily into your presence in the midst of the company of all those saints. Well, we ask all this in Jesus' name. May the God of holiness bless and keep us. May the God of tenderness smile upon us. May the God of truth bring peace to everyone. This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace, all lands of far and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. Other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and hard as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover and pine. What other lands have sunlight, blue and clover, and skies everywhere as blue as mine? Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace, for their land and for mine. We will now begin our sharing in just a few minutes to get set up for it. Who would like to begin? please say your name before you begin?
This is Sister Lois Benke. Sister Cecily is the last of the Brain Street, from Denver. The last greatest party giver. She usually planned the menu, with help, of course. Then each had a special job. Helen Sanders took care of seating space with tables, etc., in bedrooms and wherever. Mary Luke helped cut up fruit or whatever part of the meal was going to be. And Sarah Frank helped with some of whatever was needed. But she mostly kept care of the dog. One dog, or when they had two dogs, she kept them out of the way. And Carol, my sister, was in charge of coffee, drinks, whatever they were having. And all of this, they were the greatest party givers of all time.
And Sister Cabrini, I was in an audition with Cecily, and I remember first day when she was challenged to take over the choir. And also another experience I've had, I worked 7 years on the Hunger Fund, and she was very, very helpful when I collected the money and corresponded with her about the Hunger Fund. She was great. I'm a Loretto by environment. I'm Mary Pius Fagan. The only part that should be taken seriously is Fagan. I met Cecily through Mary Swain in the spring of '08. I came down to make a retreat in the Cedars, and I said that I wanted to find God through poetry and music. And she said, you know, Pius, I have this green loose leaf. He said, she's one of our poets. She said, you might find something in here of interest. That was the beginning of a marvelous and rich friendship. In fact, in a letter recently, Cecily said, you're one of my newest, but not so lighting. It was a deep relationship, I would like to think. I want to say some of her poem, some thoughts on dazzlement, an unpoetic reflection, although I think it's quite poetic. It was Christmas of 2016, and she's only had one since then, I think. Won't read the whole thing. She's always read Ronner's Meditations for Christmas. And so it begins with a line from him. It says, it is the holy night of Christmas. Its radiance still dazzles us. And it's from Holy Night by Ronner. And then she goes on. But I want to read the last two stanzas because I think they say most. Cecily says, I want to be dazzled, not just by the holy night, though I'll meditate beside the creche. I want to be dazzled by the stories he told and the friends with whom he ate, by that woman at the well and by Zacchaeus, by his blessing the children and crying over Jerusalem. I don't need the cures and miracles for dazzling, the walk on water or the halting of the wind. I am dazzled by his spirit in those who welcome refugees streaming to their shores, crossing their borders, who offer sanctuary in a Quaker meeting house or in a chain of cities, whose compassion embraces wounded earth and who work at saving it, who calm the fearful, vow nonviolence, stop the bullying, comfort the children, who, though Christian or Jew, will register as Muslim if that day comes, who are so vulnerable yet valorous, fleeing the ruins, helping each other stagger along, who know or do not know they are all kin because of that radiant night, whose dazzling will never end. And I add, Cecily, now you live in never-ending dazzle.
Sister Ann David, and I write a monthly newsletter called Live Up Our Days in Petwood of the Wonder House. So at the end of the month, I would always take it to Cecily to get it proof. It's amazing what she could find in my hard labor. But she would put little lines at the end of the sentence when there was something wrong with it. So every time I went to her room, the manuscript would be laying on her bed, and I'd check it to see how many lines. But this one time, and also the larger lines meant you need to tighten this up. That was her favorite thing. Tighten it up, tighten it up. But just one thing. There's a ginkgo tree right outside the front door. And about 2 years ago, it was trimmed. And I thought it was really butchered. So I sat down and I wrote a story about that tree. And got all this wrapped out and left. It's a little bit. At the end of the month, took it to Cecily. There was no marks or anything by it. before, when we got there, she paused and she said, "And David, if you keep this in here, you will be crucified, and I will have no pity." I took it out.
Rick Jones, nephew of Cecily from Salt Lake City, here with Lori. I remember my aunt, sister, M. Cecily Jones, father Peg, sister of my dad, Jack Jones, and brother Bob Jones. I met her when I was very young and always called her Sister Aunt Peg. Her birth name was Margaret V, and thus the short name Peg, and Peggy stuck. She would always appear at my life's big events, confirmation, weddings, graduations, funerals, and several more that I can't remember, but she was always there. She was always driving very long distances in a station wagon, I believe. She wore a short habit many years ago, but modernized a little later. Always had the similar bob hairstyle, which slowly whitened over the years, as mine has too. Peg brought warmth, good hugs, and always some good humor. She was a good listener, who could tell you stories you loved to listen to. I was always impressed with her memory and ability to go back and slowly recall so many details. This is what made her a great writer. It seems to run in the family. Both my parents were writers. I dabbled a little in annual newsletters, online chatter. The poems, mostly by Promise Collection, are very good read. Well thought out, deep meanings and reflections flowing throughout. She was an English teacher and therefore an avid protector of grammar and spelling. As we just heard. Always insisting on the correct choice. She could find a lack of good grammar in so many publications, especially these days. It would get her going, just a little excited. She lived a long life of helping others, bringing people together. Writing things that needed to be written, informing and defending social justice causes with passion. I wish I could have known and seen her become an activist during some of the Vietnam War protests and the World Peace Marches and many other good causes demanding change and attention. She was very brave in my book, not a bystander. She stood up for worthy causes, the environment, for people, God, and for country. Sometimes there were consequences, but even that didn't stop her. Meg felt strongly about capturing all she could about Sister Mary Luke Tobin's life and works. She captured details of Sister Luke's Second Vatican Council attendance and close work with the Trappist monk philosopher Thomas Merton. I know last year she was still getting even more details to write about and add to what she already had compiled and published already. Cecily, Mary Luke, Helen Sanders, and a few others, and lived many years in the Denver sister house before retiring at Florida. Lori, Michael, and I visited the mother house. Peg introduced us to everyone who came close. She knew all the sisters, club members, visitors' kitchen, and infirmary staff so well, and was part of this vibrant, close community. She will be missed. She left many good marks, a warmth and laughter that will certainly carry on. Her body let her down towards the end, but her mind was so sharp and together. Cecily left us on her terms. She can have a very strong will. My memories of her are all very positive and full of admiration with how she lived her life for others, did it so well. Sisters of Loretta have had a real treasure and an asset on these many decades. do hope some younger ones will follow that spirit a lot.
Several people have asked me to say a word about how Cecily and I connected. In 2000, Cecily came here to visit. I was introduced to her, and she already knew who I was and that I was a member of the United Church of Christ and a co-member. And the first thing she said to me, if I ever get kicked out of the Catholic Church, I'm going to the UCC. Years later, after Katrina, I was in Biloxi for 7 months. Every 7 to 9 days, there would be a letter from Cecily telling me what all was happening here. And then about 10 years ago, when I was turning 75, I decided I wanted to skydive in tandem, and I wanted to take my grandchildren, 2 grandchildren. I said this to Cecily. 2 days later, on my desk was a newspaper article on how dangerous that was. So, 2 days later, on her desk was an article on how tandem was not. And this went back and forth until she knew I had the date and it was a reality. And when I came home afterwards, there was a poem for me. And I am grateful to have been her friend, and she's one of the gems in my life. Amen.
I'm Sister Mary Lawrence. It's a joke. I feel like I should. I'm Larry Hergott. My wife and I are here from Denver, and we do a lot about the Main Street veterans. One thing they did, by the way, every Sunday in the fall, they put on the chocolate. I thought that was really sweet. We met Cecily and Luke in the mid-90s, I think, when we were invited to join a book club. And I have to tell you the truth, I was sort of a busy cardiologist, and I didn't read the books. Diane read the books, and she told me what the books were about, sort of, but I went every week, or every month. It was a once-a-month thing, because I wanted to be with Cecily and Luke. And why? We could tell right away there was something about both of them in different ways, and that our lives were better when we were with them from being with them. And we got a real feel for the Lorettos, because this is really something special. Just the beingness and
both of them for sure, and the others that were there. And then Cecily moved, Luke came here. Cecily came after, and we've had the privilege of coming on. This is our 5th visit here now. And this, of course, is the sad visit, but we're still very pleased to be here with you all. I think it must have been very hard for Cecily when Luke passed. She lost her beloved. And she was very strong about that. And but we could tell that this was a great loss for her. I, besides being a cardiologist, I'm a writer at the Center for Bioethics and Humanities at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. So I write essays and poems, but I've been deeply inspired by Cecily's poems and the things we've experienced tonight, for example, and much, much more. They have a very deep essence and something that's always you're able to take something from them and be enlightened by them. And one thing about Cecily that I'll always admire is that if we ever wrote to her, she would always write back in her own penmanship. Not so much she got into the emails later, but she would always write in these personal letters, and you could just tell that we sort of felt like she was our aunt too. And so we want to thank you for having this event and hearing everybody's stories. We're very grateful to be here, very grateful to have had Cecily as our aunt.
I'm short too. I'm Helen Jones, and my connection to Sister Cecily is through my marriage to her brother Jack Jones, which was in 1992, which came to the wedding. I first met Peggy when the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio, where I live, sent me, a civilian, to a 2-week management course in Denver. Peggy was living there with the other sisters and offered to pick me up from my hotel on Saturday for a ride in the country. Now, a ride in the country when I was growing up in Dayton meant a 60 to 90-minute ride south of the city, with a stop for ice cream before we headed home. That was not Peggy's definition of a ride in the country. Rather, we rode into the glorious Rocky Mountains for a 6 to 8 hour tour of some of her favorite viewing spots. No maps required. Peggy knew where the best clusters of her admired quaking aspens stood. It was a wonderful drive, and it was a wonderful opportunity to meet this remarkable lady. I will long remember her rides into the country. Sister Luke was along on another remarkable ride of Peggy's. Peggy drove Luke to a presentation somewhere in the Dayton vicinity and picked me up, and we headed here with their little pet dog at the time. Somewhere below Cincinnati, the car had difficulty on a very hot day. We pulled off and called AAA. When the tow truck came, it pulled the entire car, sisters, dog, and me, onto the bed of the truck and headed for the nearest gas station. It wasn't a major problem, and we were soon on our way again, but it was a unique road trip. My knowledge of Peggy as a beautiful writer and poet came later. She was so humble about her talent. It was not a badge worn on her cuff. She gave me, mostly for promise, a book of her poems from 2013. My favorite is Territory, in which she assumes the persona of Magdalene Hayden as she prepares to set out from Independence, Missouri, for the territory of New Mexico, August 1st, 1852. It begins, what do I know of territory, God? My geography holds counties, states, settlements along meandered roads, and the way a creek can carve a boundary. But she concludes, transform the journey till its end, when horizons at the edges of the earth become the territory of my heart. Peggy has journeyed to a new territory, certainly a territory of her heart. I do wish I had known this intelligent, sensitive woman much better. I wish I had visited more often. I wish we had talked more. I wish all the things people wish after someone very special has left us. And you know those things can never be. You were blessed to have her in your congregation for so many years. You will miss her, but I encourage you to recall territory and not mourn. Peggy is embracing new horizons at the edges of the earth. Thank you, and thank you for this evening. I might get a little forgetful in the middle of this, so don't worry. I probably have known Peggy longer than any of them. I'll take you to Webster Groves, Missouri. Peggy went to Webster College and graduated from there. And I and my friends, who are a very raucous group, went to Merrick's Hall. And Spillane was there too. She was raucous. As I recall, you know, at that time, like, Merrick's Hall was a high school, and it didn't have its own cafeteria. Well, we'd have to eat in the Webster College cafeteria, and we would leave crumbs and do all kinds of terrible things, you know. Those young ladies were always after us for something. Well, anyway, I graduated my class from Mary's, and many of us went up to Webster College, and we had English class there. And first of all, we had the sisters teaching us, very erudite sisters, and then we had this little person, this big, come in, and she was introduced as Miss Jones, our English teacher. Well, I guess we were pretty well behaved, and I thought, she must really be smart.
I think that's it for the Mother House.
Okay, I'm going to go to the Denver Center next. Denver Center, if anyone would like to share, go ahead and unmute the mic and begin.
I think we don't have any sharing at the moment. Thanks, Nicole.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Zoomers, it is your turn. If you'd like to share, go ahead and unmute and begin speaking. We're not going to go in any order. We're just good. Whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Hi, this is Mary Ann Coyle in Denver, and I'm truly grieving with the loss of Peggy from our midst. I was reading a little note that she sent to me not long ago. It was when we had a book signing, and she put a special note in the book. I didn't come across it until just recently, and it was saying, as she always did, expressing gratitude to the work I was doing in terms of keeping her conscious and others conscious of the universe story. And but it was so like Peggy, because no one wrote as many notes, as many personal notes as Peggy, and I certainly would like to imitate that, but I doubt that I will. Thanks.
That's good. Now you can push to speak. Did you turn it off?
No. Do you want to come in?
No. No.
Hey, Mary Ann's, are you done?
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else on Zoom like to speak?
All right, here. Okay, I'll speak. This is Barb Mecker in St. Louis.
Okay.
I had the wonderful privilege of visiting Cecily just a couple of days before she died, and she had an incredible memory of my first days in the Loretto Volunteer Program in Denver. We were laughing. She used to she used to make a Harvey Wallbanger cake and bring it to the volunteers in Denver. And Michelle she still likes to make that in her honor. She was wonderful support for the volunteer program.
Hi, this is Claudia from St. Louis. We've got a couple of people here. I too had the privilege of meeting with Cecily just a few weeks ago when we were there for the final retreat of the Loretto Volunteers. Had a really wonderful visit with her. But the time I remember very specifically was this past April, when we finally were able to find a name for the new house in St. Louis, and we now call it the Tobin House after Mary Luke Tobin. And I emailed Cecily first. She was the first one I let know that we were going to name this house in honor of Mary Luke. And she immediately responded with an email and said, "Oh my," and I can't find the email or I would read it to you, but the essence was that, "Oh my, I can't believe it. I have tears in my eyes. This is so wonderful." So
picture on the wall.
Wonderful memories of her. And there's a picture of Luke there, and I'm thinking maybe we will put up a picture of Cecily alongside of her. Thank you.
You know, this is Buffy, and we one of the few wonderful qualities of Peggy that we didn't talk about was her love of decorating the Mother House dining room. And I'm not even sure it was a work of love. It was a work of bringing joy to others. But of a Saturday, you could always find her cutting out wildflowers. You could find her then putting them in whatever case containers she had to decorate the tables in the dining room. And I don't know if she loved it, but she acted like she did.
This is Mary Helen Sandoval. And Cecily was a friend, a mentor. Well, I could go on, but I won't. But I do have a story about Cecily. Cecily was the postulant director when I was a postulant. And I came from a very, very conservative background. And so we used to have readings in the dining room. And I soon discovered that they were of a very liberal bent. And I went to Cecily, and I was just angry as could be. And I said, Cecily, Sister Cecily, I said, I'm really concerned about these readings in the dining room. And I said, they seem to be very, very liberal. And I said, I don't think it's right. And so she said, oh, well, she said, do you have some suggestions? And I said, yes. I said, I think we should have something from the Wanderer. Now, a lot of you might not even know what the Wanderer was, but it was an extremely conservative Catholic newspaper that I had received a gift subscription to when I was in college at Loretta Heights. So she said, well, Mary Helen, she said, why don't you just bring me some articles? And she said, or any books that you would like to bring. She said, just bring them to me. And she said, we can certainly read some of those in the dining room. Well, when I was met with that wonderful response, all of my anger, of course, melted away. And so I heard all the readings from a totally different perspective. And I thought, oh, well, I think these are pretty good. Maybe I don't need to add to them. So Cecily had just through being so open, that had a huge impact on my life. But that was just a one story. Of course, as all of us, I could go on with many. I'm so grateful that I was able to see her at the time of the assembly. Mary Jean Friel and I went a day early so we could spend time with Cecily, and that was a true blessing. I'm grateful to hear so many memories and so many wonderful things. I think something that was unique about Cecily is that she was able to make you feel as if you were the most special friend that she had. And I think she did that to so many of us with such grace. So I'm grateful for her life.
This is Mary Catherine Rabbit in Denver.
Catherine, you're okay.
Thank you, Nicole. I first met Cecily when I joined the Loretto staff in 1975 as social advocate, and she had a little corner office on the first floor of the staff office from which she created the most wonderful pages of interchange that I don't think we've ever reached the pinnacle of the talent and the breadth of experience that she brought to that paper. And she encouraged me to write a monthly column called the Social Advocates page, and was able to, again, very good editing on her part, allow me to speak to the community at large and to the readership of Interchange about various social justice issues that we were involved in. But it's her laugh, her smile and her laugh and those twinkling eyes that I will always remember. And whenever I went into her room, there she was, just so full of life and welcome. And when I was at the Mother House in April, I went to see her in the hospital, and she was in intensive care. And she was sitting in her chair reading The New Yorker, waiting for Peg Jacobs to bring her the New York Times for the day. And I remember saying to myself, that's the person I would like to be as well. Thank you for all that you gave all of us, Peggy, all those many years, and most of all for your wonderful, tender friendship.
This is Maureen O'Connell. One thing that Cecily and I shared, she used to say always that we were the only two people in Loretto who were originally from East St. Louis, Illinois. Right. And so one time I told her a story about when I was at a voting rights meeting up in Washington, and the invocation was done by a very large African-American preaching woman who did community organizing in East St. Louis, Illinois. And so for the rest of that conference, every time I would run into Sister Sharon, she would say, "Hey, homegirl, come over, and let me introduce you to my friends." And I'm thinking, like, I'm white, I'm not really a homegirl, but anyway, just so, any rate, from that point on, Cecily and I started calling each other homie, homegirl or homie. And she would send me notes, and she would send me articles about East St. Louis, which is, I think, still the poorest city of its size in the United States. She had a great sort of sense of trying to keep up with what was happening in that place. The last time I saw Cecily was when my class reunion was there for our third class, novitiate class reunion, and she was not doing well, and we had really been told by Peg Jacobs, who was really trying to guard her from being overtaxed, to if we went, not to stay long and to just meet her at the door. And so anyway, my whole class decided, well, we weren't going to spread it out. We would just go and stand at the door and just say, "Hi, we're just here." And of course she said, "Come on in." And we probably stayed for 15 minutes, and we violated all the rules because we couldn't get out because she was just so hospitable and so welcoming. So what a great heart and a great loss to all of us. Love you, Peggy.
This is Kathy Muller. If you can hear me. The word I thought about in terms of Peggy was the word engagement. I think of that so much when she was here in Denver and totally engaged in issues that were way beyond, that were global kinds of issues, but also very much issues of the heart that continued on even when she moved to the Mother House, could not be as active, through her writing, through the petitions, through writing letters that everybody at the Mother House could sign. And I realized that I was in the first class at Loretto Center when Peggy was the postulant director, which were some of the most difficult years of her life. And so I was part of that. But when I think of that word engagement, I realize as I think back to those times, she taught us engagement in the world in ways that were simple and subtle and changed our lives forever, whether we stayed in Loretto or we moved out as a formal member. And so that sense of engagement and awareness of the world and the people of the world. And the other thing that she did for me is that she taught us scripture when we were postulants and then novices. And it was the first time that the gospel became a real living book, and Jesus became much more real to me. And it was something that has changed my life, just as her friendship through all these years has changed my life. And I'm very grateful.
I just wanted to pop in quickly. This is Julie Kerber, and I'm kind of one of those new co-members. And I wanted to echo what Mary Jane said about how Cecily made folks feel so special, even those that were of us who weren't, didn't have a long history. And just in particular, something that was so touching and such a gift. When there were 4 of us that were at the Mother House, and we came into the community with our celebration, and Cecily wrote a poem for us, and it sounds like she wrote a lot of personal poems and personal letters. And so it was just that individual, personal caring and engagement with each person, looking in the eye, taking pen to paper, and really making a difference for each person as well as the world. So thank you, Cecily. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Would anyone else on Zoom like to share?
Just a moment. This is Marianne again, but I want to introduce to you Julie McGuire, who is here. Now, go ahead, talk. When I learned of Peggy's death, I immediately thought of my earliest recollection of her, and it was when the People's Fair here in Denver was still being held at East High, and one of the booths was to reelect Congresswoman Pat Schroeder, and there was Cecily, big smile, ready to greet everybody and ready to represent Pat to anyone who came by. And the other memory I have is when she started to organize the trips out to Amache, the Japanese internment camp during World War II. And the bus ride was a little long, no problems, very comfortable. And I remember these beautiful, beautiful worship liturgies that she would put together for all of us to recite out there. And everyone who is a lover of her poetry knows the way that she could tap in to the movement of the Holy Spirit for all people to heal. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Hi, this is Mike Leard out in Arizona, and I wanted to just quickly read off. Cecily was such an inspiration for me that whenever I wrote, I kind of tried to channel what she was able to inspire in me. And so this was just my response when I heard of her passing. Sister, let me not be a shadow. The delicacy of those hushed circles, curled up at the foot of knowledge, nestled in Knob's downy rockers. You, a painter and a pilot, the crisp drop of syllables, wildflowers sculpted with careful eyes. You sang us the epic, that surging, searching strength of pioneers, shapers, wanderers, held aloft by your craft, giving us fever dreams of an earth at peace with itself, dancing through the violent throes of human kindness and cruelty, creating and becoming, creating, becoming. If I could hold a candle, let me be not a shadow. Thank you, Cecily.
Okay, Mother House, back to you. Pat, go ahead.
Thank you, Nicole. It's Pat McCormick in Denver at the center. And I want to be sure that all at the Mother House, and especially Peggy's relatives, know that on August 13, we are going to have a celebration here, which will include Loretto community members and many, many of Peggy's friends in the Denver area. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to sign off. I think we're done.
Thank you, Nicole.